Welcome to According to Sam, folks. This is episode 371. Thank you for joining me today. Hope you guys had a Merry Christmas. It's Monday. I'm back. We're going to pick up where we left off in the last podcast. Well, not going to pick up where we left off in the last podcast. We're going to get slowly back into the Babylonian captivity, the exile, back into the book of Daniel. In the last podcast, we told the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego being tossed into the fiery furnace. We talked about the destruction of Solomon's temple, the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar bringing thousands, 7,000 to 10,000 exiles from the kingdom of Judah back into Babylon. And I was explaining to you that the mission of Nebuchadnezzar and bringing all these prominent people from Judah back into Babylon was he wanted to make them Babylonian. He destroyed the temple, which was the center of their culture. He wanted them to forget about their Jewish culture, their Jewish God, and he wanted to incorporate these brilliant minds, these prominent people from Judah. He wanted to incorporate them into the Babylonian Empire and make them Babylonian. I was explaining in the last podcast about how Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, even the changing of their names. Daniel was his Hebrew name, but the Babylonians gave him the name Belshazzar. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, their Hebrew names were Ananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, and they gave them the Babylonian names of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. It was all an attempt to transform these Hebrew people into Babylonians and make them forget about their Hebrew culture. And these people were used in prominent positions in Babylon. When you bring exiles like Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, now remember that they had already been brought to Babylon because in Nebuchadnezzar's first siege of Judah, he tells King Jehoiakim to give him some prominent prisoners to take back to Babylon. And this is years before he destroyed the temple and sacked the entire city. So Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, and other prominent male figures, the future leaders of Judah, had already been brought back to Babylon, and they were used in administrative positions. They were used to carry out the same duties that they were reared to carry out in Judah. These are some of the most prominent young individuals in Judah that were trained and reared to be leaders in Judah. So when Nebuchadnezzar brings them back to Babylon, they're going to be leaders in Babylon as well. So we went through the story of them, Nebuchadnezzar trying to force them to bow to the Babylonian statue. It could have been Marduk. It could have been Nabu, who knows? But Nebuchadnezzar was trying to force them to bow to this this image, this statue that he had built, and they wouldn't do it. And then we started getting into the story of Daniel interpreting Nebuchadnezzar's dream in the last podcast. We will get back into that. I want to go through some Roman history, though, before we get back into that history. And that's where we're going to start today. And we're going to start with the Roman Emperor Diocletian. I'm going to tell you who Diocletian is. Diocletian is the Roman emperor who is credited with ending what is called the crisis of the 3rd century. And the crisis of the 3rd century was this crisis in the Roman Empire, after Pax Romana. And Pax Romana had five emperors that in succession with no problems in the succession. This was Pax Romana. It's called Pax Romana, means the Roman peace. This was the greatest time in the Roman Empire was in this period, Pax Romana. Pax Romana ends with what's his name? the Marcus Aurelius isn't the last emperor. Marcus Aurelius' son is the last emperor, but Marcus Aurelius' son was an idiot and he was assassinated, and that brought in the Severan dynasty, and then the Severan dynasty. At the end of the Severan dynasty is when the third century crisis started. But the third century crisis, it was already well on its way to happening by the time Marcus Aurelius died. This is all in the movie Gladiator. You've seen the first movie Gladiator with Russell Crowe. This is all about Marcus Aurelius dying, and in the movie, this is dramatized, but Marcus Aurelius tells the Russell Crowe character, I want you to succeed me. I don't want my idiot son Commodus to succeed me. But Commodus in the movie kills Marcus Aurelius, and then he takes the throne. And then Marcus Aurelius Commodus is eventually assassinated, which brings about the Severan dynasty. But that starts the third century crisis and the end of Pax Romana. And then if you've seen the sequel of Gladiator, that is during the Severan dynasty when Geta and Caracalla, who were the sons of Septimius Severus, who kind of brings the empire together again. He's African. He brings the empire together again for a short time, and then the third century crisis ends at the end of the Severan dynasty. Severan Alexander is the last Severan emperor. And then Diocletian, like I said, Diocletian is the one who gets credit for ending the third century crisis. And the third century crisis had many problems. It was the debasement of the currency. It was the migration, the barbarian invasion, the migration, the peasant rebellions. I mean, tons of instability, losing of territory. They lose Gaul. They lose the portion of the empire, which is the Levant, where Israel is, and they lose all this territory, and it's just crises all over the empire. But the main crisis was the crisis of succession. You just had all these upstarts that were just, taking power, and you would have a ruler take power. He'd get assassinated by someone in his army that would just take power. There was the true crisis of the third century was a succession crisis. And Diocletian is the one who gets credit for ending the crises, although Aurelian had already ended the crises before Diocletian, but he is assassinated by one of the members of his army. So he doesn't really get credit for it, but it's actually Aurelian who brings the empire back together again and kind of stabilizes things. But Diocletian becomes emperor after Aurelian, and Diocletian is the one who gets credit for ending the crises because Diocletian comes up with a plan, a succession plan, and Diocletian's plan is what ended the crises. And Diocletian's plan for succession was tetrarchy. Tetrarchy basically translates into rule of four. That's what it rules. So you have monarchy, rule of one, and tetrarchy means rule of four. And the idea for tetrarchy was that there was going to be four different rulers that were going to have, like we have here in the United States. We have the president and we have the vice president. If something happens to the president, just like when John Kennedy is assassinated in 1963, the vice president, LBJ, becomes president. So that's the succession system that Diocletian came up with, that not only was there going to be one emperor for the entire empire and then a vice emperor who, if something happened to the emperor, the vice emperor would take charge. No, this is rule of four. This is that the empire was basically two different empires. And that's what you got to understand, because when we get back into the Nebuchadnezzar's dream and the statue and the two legs representing the Roman Empire, that what you need to understand is that there was two legs of the Roman Empire. There was the Western leg where they spoke Latin predominantly, and then there was the Eastern leg where they spoke Greek predominantly. The Eastern leg was more associated with the old world, and then the new world in the West, where they spoke Latin, it was more associated with the new world. The capital was in Rome, which was the new world, but the major influence of the empire was in the East, where the old world. There was two legs of the Roman Empire. So when Diocletian sets up tetrarchy, he sets up one emperor for the East, one emperor for the West, and then a vice emperor for the East and the vice emperor for the West. That's tetrarchy. That's four different rulers. Your main emperor for the East, main emperor for the West, and then a vice emperor for the East, vice emperor for the West. Something happens to the main emperor, then the vice emperor would become the new emperor, and then he would appoint someone else to become the vice emperor. This was a system that Diocletian set up, and that's why Diocletian gets credit for ending the 3rd century crisis. Well, in the when Diocletian becomes emperor and he sets up tetrarchy, well, he's going to set himself to be one of the main emperors. So who does he set himself up to be the main emperor of which leg of the Roman Empire? The Western leg or the Eastern leg? The Eastern leg, because the Eastern leg, the East was where the center of the world was. The Greek-speaking East is where the center of the world was. It was the most important. So Diocletian makes himself the emperor of the East, and then he makes this guy, Maximian, he makes him the ruler of the East. And Galerius becomes the vice emperor of the East. I mean, so it's Diocletian and Galerius in the East, and then it's Maximian and Constantus in the West. So Constantus is the vice emperor, and Constantus is the father of Constantine the Great Constantine. This is how Constantine, after his father is killed, then Constantine, his army names him as the emperor, and Constantine eventually becomes the main emperor of the West. He has this famous battle, the Battle of Milvian Bridge, where he defeats Maxentius, and he defeats him, and he becomes the sole emperor of the West. Constantine doesn't even bother with tetrarchy anymore, naming a vice emperor or anything. He's the emperor of the West. And by this time, and there is a emperor in the East, and his name is Licinius. And Licinius becomes the main emperor in the East. And then the major issue between these, well, let's go back to the Battle of the Milvian Bridge. So the night before the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, when Constantine is going to fight this battle, and this is going to make him either a loser or he's going to be the sole emperor of the Western leg of the Roman Empire. Constantine, the story is that he had some dream. And in this dream, Constantine dreams of a Christian symbol, the Chi-Rho, this Greek symbol, the Chi-Rho, and he dreams of this symbol. And in his dream, he's told that if you fight under this Christian symbol, then you will be victorious. So Constantine commands all of his bannermen to paint their banners with this Christian symbol. They fight under this war fought at the Milvian Bridge. When Constantine fights under the Christian banner is the very first war in human history fought under a Christian banner. This is the very first Christian war, is this battle at Milvian Bridge. And Constantine fights this battle under the Christian banner, and he wins. He becomes victorious. And in the ancient world, that was huge to win a war under a banner of a god, even this god you didn't know, because what that does is that gives the god more credibility. But this is the way they thought back in the old world. If Constantine would have lost this battle, it's very likely that Christianity would have not been what it is today. But the fact that he won this battle under that banner, and many of these men that fought in his army were Goths, they started to say, oh, the Christian God has brought us victory, so we need to start getting. Many of them become Christians after this. Constantine himself, he doesn't get baptized until his deathbed. It's said that Constantine's mother was a worshiper of Sol Invictus. She was a worshiper of the sun. Many of Romans were part of the Sol Invictus worship. We're talking about Aurelian. Aurelian was a worshiper of Sol Invictus, and a lot of people believe that Constantine, like his mother, worshiped Sol Invictus as well, the sun, Sol Invictus. But he didn't get baptized until his deathbed. But the story is that he converted to Christianity before this battle at the Milvian Bridge. He unites the empire under the Christian banner. And before this, Christians were being persecuted. This was a huge thing throughout all of the empire, the persecutions. The Diocletian persecutions were the worst persecutions. When you talk about the blood of the martyrs being the seeds of the church, and Christians being fed to lions, and all kinds of other persecutions, I mean, you should look into the Diocletian persecutions, the persecutions under Diocletian in the East. And then again, when Diocletian is not emperor anymore, like I was explaining to you, that when Constantine becomes the sole emperor of the West, and Licinius becomes the sole emperor of the East, they actually signed this edict that they're not going to persecute Christians anymore, because now that Constantine had become Christian and all of his men were Christian, they wanted to protect all the Christians. They're in the West, in the Western leg, but they wanted to make sure that all the Christians in the Eastern part of the empire were also protected. So Constantine and the emperor in the East, the sole emperor of the East at that time, Licinius, they signed this edict that they're not gonna, it's called the Edict of Milan. You can see it here. Edict of Milan, where he signs with Constantine, so we're not going to persecute Christians anymore. But then he starts persecuting Christians again. And then that gives Constantine the justification to raid the Eastern Empire. Constantine is the ruler of the Western leg. He raids and fights this war against Licinius in the East. He wins that war again under the Christian banner, and then he unites the entire empire as a Christian empire. As a Christian empire. Very important that you understand this. So then after Constantine unites the entire empire as the Christian empire, he was the sole emperor in the West, but the center of the universe is in the East. The East is far more important than the West. So after Constantine becomes the emperor, this is what the total empire looks like. This is these are the break-off regions that broke off during the 3rd century crisis. But all of these, everything that you see in color, yellow and green, after Aurelian brought them, all these breakaway regions back into the Roman Empire. So this was all the Roman Empire, the Levant, Egypt, North Africa, the Iberian Peninsula, Britain. All of this was the Roman Empire. And what was happening were the Goths were moving in and invading during the 3rd century crisis. So you had all these different Goths coming in, the Visigoths, the Ostrogoths, the Franks, many of these Gothic groups coming over into the Roman Empire. So when Constantine unites the empire again into one Christian empire, it's a Christian empire at this time because Constantine is a Christian emperor. So he unites the empire again. It's not pagan. It's a Christian empire at this time. He moves the capital from Rome to what he calls the city Constantinople. This is the beginning of the Byzantine Empire. So you still have two legs of the empire. You still have the Western leg. They spoke Latin over here. You have the Eastern leg where they spoke Greek, but he moves the entire capital, everything, moves the entire capital to Constantinople. And he does it for strategic reasons. First of all, he does it because the center of the universe is the east, and he wanted to be on the east. But he also he moved it to this area because it was protected by three bodies of water. You had the Golden Horn, the Bosphorus, and the Marmara Sea. So the water to the east, that anyone who was going to attack the city had to do so by naval vessels. And then when Theodosius becomes the emperor after Constantine had built, you can see here, it says Constantine Wall. He had built this small protective wall while he was ruler. But when Theodosius becomes ruler, Theodosius builds the Theodosian walls, and the Theodosian protects this city, the eastern leg of the Roman Empire, for 1,000 years beyond this period where Constantine, inaugurates the city. Till the Ottoman Turks don't conquer the city of Constantinople until 1453. To give you some perspective of that, Christopher Columbus discovers the New World in the 1490s, and this was just less than 40 years before Christopher Columbus discovers the New World, or 50 years before Christopher Columbus, in a lifetime before Christopher Columbus discovers the New World, the Roman city of Constantinople, Byzantium, was still standing. So let's let you know how long. And the reason that it was able to weather all the attacks by the Muslim hordes for 700 years, tried to conquer the city, and they finally do in the 15th century with the Ottoman Turks. The reason that the city was able to repel all these attacks from the Huns, from all these different groups that attacked the city, and they were able to maintain their existence for centuries, is because of the Theodosian walls. When Theodosius becomes emperor, just a few years after the death of Constantine, he builds the Theodosian walls. I have this first clip that I want to play, which talks about the Theodosian walls. And you'll notice here that these are the two legs, getting back to the Nebuchadnezzar's dream that Daniel's going to interpret, and it's a statue of a man which has two legs, and two legs represent the Roman Empire. This is what you see. It's not accurate. Daniel's interpretation and this dream is that centuries before this was on paper, and this is exactly what we find with the Roman Empire. You have two legs of the Roman Empire. You have the western leg and you have the eastern leg. And this is a clip about the Theodosian walls. Take a listen.
Constantinople was the beating heart of the Eastern Roman Empire. This seat of imperial power was ideally located to project both military and economic control over its vast territories. The city itself had been founded in 324 AD by the Emperor Constantine and bears his name. An initial set of walls protected the capital, enclosing an area of around 2.5 square miles. Within 90 years, however, the city had outgrown its defenses. This posed a distinct threat to the security of the eastern capital in a time of mounting external pressure. As a result, the 4th century had already seen many Roman cities construct walls to ensure their defense. The emperor's throne, however, would require something a little more extensive. Upon the death of Emperor Arcadius in May 408, his son, Theodosius II, became Emperor of the East. However, Theodosius was only 7 upon his ascension to power. In his stead, Anthemius, the Praetorian prefect, held the reins of power. Anthemius was Egyptian-born, but had risen through the ranks to become one of the late emperor's most trusted advisors. He was known as a resourceful man and careful planner. Recently, Anthemius had helped ensure a smooth transfer of imperial power while also securing peace with the Sassanids. This moment of calm afforded the empire the time and resources to address the issue of Constantinople's defenses. Anthemius ambitiously proposed the construction of an entirely new set of fortifications. His plan was to double the area protected by the outdated walls of Constantine. These new walls would run half a mile further out than the previous ones and would span shore to shore from the Golden Horn to the Propontis. This bold plan would safeguard the entirety of the peninsula while leaving enough room for further expansion of the city. The emperor approved Anthemius' plan and commissioned the project. This monumental task took several years and was finally complete in 413. It would prove to be one of the most formidable structures ever built in the Roman Empire.
It had a moat.
Something outdated walls of the entirety of the peninsula and commissioned the project. This monumental task took several years and was finally complete in 413. It would prove to be one of the most formidable structures ever built in the Roman.
So it had a moat outside of the wall. This wall that Theodosius constructed was massive, and this is what allowed the city to last until the 15th century.
Empire.
It was just very impressive engineering feat.
The Theodosian walls were constructed in 3 layers, with each successive line being taller and thicker than the last. The innermost wall was 16 feet thick and 36 feet tall. Its core was made of strong, packed rubble. All
right, so that's the Theodosian walls. So the Theodosian walls, they allow the city of Constantinople to survive until the 15th century. Now, what was going on in the western part of the empire, while the eastern part of the empire was thriving? Now, I mean, Constantinople, for Constantine to move the capital from Rome to Constantinople, everything that was of importance was in the east now. So the west started to become less important. And in the beginning, the Byzantine Empire would send military support and supplies back to the west if they needed it. But as when the Muslims come on the scene, and then the Byzantines have to start battling the Muslims and taking on the Muslims, they don't really have the resources to keep sending back to Rome and to take care of Rome, even though they still considered Rome and the eastern part of the empire their property, and that it's still part of our empire. As time went on, it became less important because the East became the center of the universe, and the Greek Christian church, the church there in Constantinople, becomes more important than even the church there in Rome. The patriarch of Constantinople is even more important than the Pope or the Bishop of Rome. This is what a lot of people don't understand, that before the conclave doesn't come about until something like the 9th century. Before the conclave, when a Pope was a Bishop of Rome was appointed, they had to get approval. They had to get approval from the church in Constantinople before a Bishop of Rome could become a Bishop of Rome, could become Pope. They had to send back word and get approval from the Patriarch of Constantinople, basically the emperor. That's how things were done. But as time went on, and the eastern part of the Roman Empire were not able to provide resources. I mean, mainly protection from the Goths and the other invading tribes from that were coming over the border. Then the Romans were like, or the people that were in Rome and in Italy proper started to say to themselves, well, why are we still paying homage to Constantinople and to the Byzantines and still listening to what they say and still letting them rule us if they're not even able to protect us? They're not able to send resources when we need them. We need someone else to protect us. And there was one group of Goths that became very important, and that is the Franks. Because in the 5th century, late 5th century, this is the Frankish king Clovis. Clovis is the first Merovingian king. He starts the Merovingian dynasty, and he is baptized into Chalcedon Christianity in the 5th century. And this made the Franks Christian. And this is very important that the Franks, out of all the different groups, Gothist groups that, Germanic groups that are coming over the border, the Visigoths, the Ostrogoths, the Lombards, all these different groups that were all pagan. They all basically participated in German paganism. The only group that was Christian, that became Christian, was the Franks. And the reason that they become Christian is because Clovis I is baptized into Christianity in the fifth century. So the Franks become Christian. This is what's going on in the western part. So Clovis is the first king, Merovingian king of the Franks. He brings all the Franks together under the Christian banner. So they have an allegiance to the Eastern Roman Empire through Christianity. We're all Christians. We all worship, especially when they're being confronted by the Muslims. When the Muslims come on the scene, then they unite. They say that we're all Christians. We're under the Christian banner, that we're all the same. Roman Christianity. I mean, even the eastern part of the empire was Roman Christianity because they saw themselves as Romans. We call them Byzantine now, but they saw themselves as Roman. They were Roman. And in the West, it was Roman Catholicism. So then Pippin the Short becomes the king of the Franks in the 8th century. And Pippin the Short is a very interesting person because Pippin the Short is sandwiched in between two very, very popular Franks. His father, Charles Martel and the Carolingian family, they were kind of the administrators of the Frankish Empire. They like, if you watch the Game of Thrones, you have the king, but you have the hand of the king. The hand of the king basically runs everything throughout the empire. And that's what the Carolingians were. They were basically a noble family, very powerful noble family, even powerful at the end. They were even more powerful than the Merovingian dynasty. And that's kind of why Pippin the Short did what he did. Pippin the Short says, we have all the power, but we don't have the title of king. We're doing everything that the king should be doing. We're running the entire Frankish Empire or Frankish kingdom, and we're in charge. We just don't have the title of king. So Pippin wanted to rectify that. He wanted to be king. His father, Charles Martel, was the one who fought the battle against the Muslims that prevented the Muslims from, this is during when they had taken over Spain and Andalus. They tried to come into France, and Charles Martel is the one who prevents them from taking over France and eventually taking over all of Europe. So Charles Martel becomes very famous after defeating the Muslims. And again, that just increased the notoriety of the Carolingian family. So what Pippin does in the 8th century, he makes a deal with the Pope, Pope Zachary, who at that time was being, tormented by the Lombards in Italy. And, he basically, this was one of the things that the church there in Italy and Rome started saying, well, what do we need the Byzantines for? What do we need the eastern part of the empire if they can't even come over and protect us? So he started looking for other protection. So he went to Pippin the Short, and Pippin the Short wanted the notoriety for his family to, they had all the power, but they wanted to be kings. So they came up with this plan. The Pope Zachary was going to crown Pippin the Short the new king of the Franks. They deposed the Merovingian king, and then Pippin the Short and the Carolingian promised to protect. That we're going to protect the papacy and the church there and the papal lands that were there in Italy. That we'll protect the papacy if you make me king, make the Carolingian line king, depose the Merovingian, and then we'll protect you. And then, like I said, Pippin was sandwiched in between two very, very popular Carolingians, his father, Charles Martel, and then his son, Charlemagne the Great. And then Charlemagne comes to power, and Charlemagne, he sees himself as the new Roman emperor. That he sees himself as no different as the Roman emperor in the east. He sees himself as the Roman emperor in the west, that he was the ruler of Rome. As a matter of fact, that's what the Pope said when the Pope crowned Charlemagne. You can see right here on December 25th, Christmas Day, 800, Pope Leo III crowned Frankish King Charlemagne. He's the second king in the Carolingian line of the Franks. That Pope Leo III crowned Frankish King Charlemagne Roman Emperor. He crowned him Roman Emperor. That Charlemagne was Roman. So you have two Roman emperors again. The Roman emperor in the west. Now we're in the 9th century. The Roman emperor in the west is Charlemagne, and the Roman emperor in the east becomes this woman. She's the first female emperor. Her name is Irene. And Irene and Charlemagne were almost married. Many historians debate over what would the world have actually looked like if Irene and Charlemagne would have gotten married, because that would have united the East and the Western Empire again under two military powers, the military power of the Carolingians and the Franks in the West, and the military power of the Byzantines in the East, if Irene and Charlemagne would have been married. And this was proposed. Take a listen.
Irene of Athens, known for her role in restoring the veneration of icons in the Eastern Roman Empire, also holds a unique distinction in the annals of history. She was the first woman to be recognized as the sole ruler, or basileus, of the Roman Empire, ascending to power after the death of her husband, Emperor Leo IV, and the minority of her son, Constantine VI. Irene ruled as regent from 780 AD before declaring herself co-emperor in 797 AD. What is less commonly known is Irene's ambitious foreign policy, particularly her negotiations with Charlemagne. In a bold move that stunned contemporaries, Irene proposed a marriage alliance between herself and Charlemagne, which would have united the Eastern and Western empires. Although the marriage never transpired, this proposal highlights Irene's vision of a restored Roman Empire under joint rule, a testament to her political acumen and her audacious approach.
So there was several reasons that this marriage was proposed, and it would have benefited. I can see why Charlemagne and Irene would have both been interested in this, but it never took place. And there's many theories about why this marriage never took place. But Irene was the very first female empress, and there were a lot of people that were doubting her claim to be empress. So marrying Charlemagne would have given her some more credibility. Charlemagne's father had just deposed the Merovingian dynasty, and there were a lot of people questioning the legitimacy of the Carolingians. So that would have given him more legitimacy if he would have married Irene, and it would have united the empire again. But I want you to see, and if they would have united the empire again, then there wouldn't have been two legs. Getting back to Nebuchadnezzar's dream and the two legs of the Roman Empire in the statue in Nebuchadnezzar's dream. If Irene and Charlemagne would have gotten married and they would have united the empire, there wouldn't have been two legs. There wouldn't have been the eastern leg and the western leg. They would have been joined together again. But no, the eastern leg and the western leg grew apart. The eastern leg and the western leg grew apart, and mainly through the Catholic religion. In the east, the Greek Orthodox Church was adopted by the czars in Russia, became very prominent in the east, even after the destruction of the capital in Byzantium in the 15th century. You still had the influence of the Eastern Church, of the Eastern leg through the Eastern Church, and the same thing in the West. In the West, that's why Charlemagne is called the Holy Roman Emperor. And some people say, well, Charlemagne never referred to himself as the Holy Roman Emperor. Us as historians look back and refer to him as the first Holy Roman Emperor. But Charlemagne ends up conquering Saxony, which is Germany, and then Otto the First is the first who called himself the Holy Roman Emperor in Germany. This is where I explained in the last podcast where you get the word Reich. You get the word Reich, the very first Reich was the Reich of Otto the Great. Hegelius Romanisch Reich is where you get Reich. Reich 1 is Otto the Great. Reich 2 is Kaiser Wilhelm II, when he brings the German people together. That's the second Reich. The third Reich is the Reich of Hitler's Nazi Germany. And people have talked about the future Fourth Reich. This is where it comes from. This is why people say that when you understand that the British Empire now is run by Germans, Germans, that George I, when he was brought to England to rule England, he was German. He couldn't even speak any English. He was German. The Windsors, they changed their name during World War I from Saxe-Coburg-Gotha to Windsor because they are German. This goes so deep, people. This is what the Reich is all about. This is why they call America the Reich. And they believe that America is the new Rome. I was explaining to you that in the last podcast that the Treaty of Rome is the treaty. It's called the Treaty of Rome. This is the treaty that unites all of the nations in Europe under the banner of the European Union. It's called the Treaty of Rome. Treaty of Rome was signed on 25th of March, 1957. Belgium, France, Italy, Luxembourg, Netherlands, West Germany. These are the initial groups in the European Union. This is why Benjamin Netanyahu believes that America is the new Rome. He says it. We played this in the last podcast. He's here with Pompeo. He says that America is the new Rome.
We had a moving visit today to the wall. I can't resist repeating this, but I'm going to. I said to the secretary that the last time Pompeo visited Jerusalem didn't end that well. But this is a different time. Rome and Jerusalem clashed over values with a great tragedy for the Jewish people. But the new Rome, the United States, views itself as a new Jerusalem.
So the new Rome is the United States. He's saying that. He says the last time, because Pompeo, his last name is Pompeo, but if you don't know, there was an Roman Emperor Pompey who clashed with Jerusalem, like Netanyahu is saying. And he's saying the last time that Pompey came to Jerusalem, things didn't end so well, that the Romans are the ones who destroyed Jerusalem. The Romans are the ones who destroyed our temple. The Romans are the one who sent us in exile. This is what Netanyahu is referring to. Very important, people. This is another interaction. Someone comes up to compete, and they act like this is just, out of the blue. Someone comes up to Netanyahu and asks him this question. I believe that this was completely, that they want you to know.
We want to know what you're reading now.
What I'm reading?
Yeah.
It's a book by a historian named Barry Strauss. It's called The Jews Against Rome.
Jews Against Rome.
Jews Against Rome.
What made you pick it up?
Well, we lost that one. I think we have to win the next one.
Well, we lost that one. Well, we lost that one. I think we got to win the next one. So the Jews Against Rome, he's already said that the new Rome is America. We lost the first one with the first Rome. This is the new Rome, the new Rome. This is what they're talking about. They're talking about the United States being the new Rome. I want you to listen to this rabbi.
And when the Nekama comes down on the world, when the revenge of Hashem comes down on the world, it comes down on Babylonia, Iraq. Destroys the first temple, comes down on Edom, all over Edom.
Edom. What is he talking about? All over Edom. What is Edom? So he's saying that when the revenge of God comes, the revenge of God is going to come to the Babylonians. Why the Babylonians? He tells you because the Babylonians destroyed the first temple, Solomon's temple. He says, but the revenge of God is also going to come on Edom because Edom destroyed the second temple. Who destroyed the second temple? It was the Romans under Titus Vespasian in 70 AD. So he's saying Edom, the revenge of God is going to come on the Babylonians, and it's going to come on Edom because they destroyed the two temples, the first temple and the second temple. First temple destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians. The first temple and then the second temple was destroyed by Titus Vespasian and the Romans. And the revenge of God is going to come to the Babylonians and Edom.
And when the Nekama comes down on the world, when the revenge of Hashem comes down on the world, it comes down on Babylonia, Iraq. Destroys the first temple, comes down on Edom, all over Europe, all over America. It's all part of Edom. It will come down very, very hard, for they destroyed the second temple.
So all of the revenge of God is going to come down on the Babylonians and Edom. Have a few clips here re-emphasizing that Jewish people, these Orthodox Jews that you're going to hear right now, they see, and Benjamin Netanyahu, you just heard Benjamin Netanyahu said, he's the prime minister of Israel. You just heard him say that America and Europe is not only the new Rome or the extension of Rome, it is Edom.
You know for a fact, you know this for a fact, because you teach this in your yeshivas, America is Edom. I'm talking again, an Orthodox Jew. So you are living currently in Edom. You know this, right?
In the fourth exile, which is Edom, we are currently in Galut Edom right now, and we are dealing with them, or God is dealing with them, and don't worry, they will be dealt with.
Why is this described as Golus Edom? So a few reasons. Reason number one is, even if the Romans are gone, but the Churban that they effected has not been changed. The Romans destroyed the second Beis HaMikdash in approximately the year 70 of the Common Era.
Second temple. Romans destroyed it.
And they exiled many, many Jews. They murdered many, many Jews. And they were machriv the Beis HaMikdash. We are still in that Golus until the Beis HaMikdash is rebuilt. The fact that the Romans are gone does not change the fact that the Golus we're in, and even if we're living in Israel, and even if we're living in Jerusalem, we are in Golus until Mashiach comes, and there's a binyan Beis HaMikdash. And that Churban happened by the Romans, so we're the Golus of Edom. That's reason number one. Reason number two is that essentially Western civilization, as we know it, is fundamentally a product of Rome. Because what Rome did was, Rome took the ideas of Greek philosophy and democracy and government and politics, and Rome disseminated those ideas throughout the known world.
They're telling you everything.
So what became known as Western civilization, and most Jews in the world are under the rule of Western civilization, it's a product of Rome. Even the alphabet itself, the English alphabet itself, which is used by most countries in the world, most countries have the Latin alphabet or whatever it would be, is a product of Rome.
Rome, considered at some time the capital of Europe, is a descendant of Esav.
This is Malachi chapter 1, verse 1. I love Jacob and I hate Esav. I hate Esav. What do you mean you hate Esav? Esav is 3 billion people almost. That came from him. All the Europeans are children of Esav. Russia, France, England, French people, Danish people, Swedish people, Scandinavians, United States, all the Americans, not the blacks. The blacks came from Africa, from Ham. But all the white people in America are all children of Esav. Dutch, German, Irish, British, they are all from Esav. The people with the nice look, the European women, the European men with the blue eyes, the green eyes, the blonde hair, the nice skin, whatever you want to call it. And obviously America also came from Europe, from England and Holland and Germany and Irish. This is the Italian, this is America. It's all from Europe. Germany, France, Russia, and the immigrants that came from Europe and established United States, it's all Esav. One person is their father. So when the Torah say Edom it's Esav, it means every country that came from Esav, it's a part of that prophecy. In the end, the older will have to bow down to the young. Who is the older? Esav, right? Who is the youngest? Yaakov. Who is Esav today, in today's world? Who is Esav? The Europeans, the Nazis, the Russians, the French, the Americans, they're all children of Esav. Shem already telling Rivka, there are two nations coming out from you, the Jews and the Nazis, and the children of Esav. There will be enemies. In the end, they will all bow down to Yaakov. Meaning that the Gentiles will have to serve the Jews always. Why? Because this is written in the book of God.
So basically, you get the idea that many people, not just this guy, even the current prime minister of Israel, believes that the United States is the new Rome. That is the extension of Rome, that Rome never died. The eastern leg or the western leg. Okay, so let's get back into the
Daniel continues in verse 30.
The dream that Nebuchadnezzar has, and Daniel interprets the dream, and we'll listen to a little bit of it, and then we'll wind up today and then pick this back up in the next podcast. But if you don't remember, Nebuchadnezzar has this dream. This is in Daniel chapter 5. And this is during the Babylonian exile, the Babylonian captivity, when Daniel and all of these thousands of people from the kingdom of Judah had been brought into exile into Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar has this dream. He doesn't know what it is. He's troubled by it. And he wants his astrologers, his sorcerers, his people that are supposed to be able to do this stuff. He wants them to interpret the dream, tell him what the dream was, and then interpret the dream. None of them are able to do it, so he's threatening to kill them if they're not able to do it. And then Daniel comes along and says, look, I can't interpret your dream and tell you what it is, but I know a God who can. So he prays to God. God tells him what the dream is and tells him what the dream means, and this is what the dream is.
We'll see the interpretation. In verse 28, Daniel explains, there is a God in heaven who reveals secrets, and has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will be in the latter days. Your dream and the visions of your head were these. You were watching, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose splendor was excellent, stood before you, and its form was awesome. This image's head was of gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. You watched while a stone was cut out without hands, which struck the image on its feet of iron and clay and broke them in pieces. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were all crushed together and became like chaff. The wind carried them away so that no trace of them was found. And the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. This is the dream. Daniel continues in verse 36. Now we will tell the interpretation of it. You, O king, are a king of kings. For the God of heaven has given you a kingdom, power, strength, and glory. He has made you ruler over all. You are this head of gold. But after you shall arise another kingdom inferior to yours. Then a third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over all the earth. And the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron, inasmuch as iron breaks in pieces and shatters everything. And like iron that crushes, that kingdom will break in pieces and crush all the others. Whereas you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, yet the strength of the iron shall be in it. So the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly fragile. As you saw iron mixed with ceramic clay, they will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not adhere to one another, just as iron does not mix with clay. And in the days of these kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. It shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. Inasmuch as you saw the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God has made known to the king what will come to pass after this. The dream is certain, and its interpretation is sure. Now, let's break it down and examine who these world-ruling kingdoms were. So the first section of the statue in Nebuchadnezzar's dream, the head of gold, we are explicitly told represented Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom. That was the Neo-Babylonian Empire, otherwise known as the Chaldean Empire, from 626 BC to 539 BC. Now, for the remaining kingdoms, we're not explicitly told in chapter 2 who they were, but chapters 5 through 8, as well as the book of Revelation, give more insight. So we'll let the Bible interpret the Bible and use these other chapters to find the answer. The second section of the statue, the chest and arms of silver, pointed to the next world-ruling empire on the world scene. That was the empire of the Medes and Persians, ruling from 558 BC to 330 BC. We know this both from history and the Bible. The events of the end of the Chaldean Empire and the beginning of the Medo-Persian Empire are recorded in Daniel 5 with the famous story of the handwriting on the wall. And in verse 30 we read, "That very night Belshazzar, king of the Chaldeans, was slain, and the Medes received the kingdom." We see an additional reference to the Medo-Persian Empire in chapter 8. There, Daniel saw in vision a ram with 2 horns and a male goat. Verse 20 says, "The ram which you saw having 2 horns, they are the kings of Media and Persia." It was during these first 2 empires that Daniel recorded the visions and prophecies. He served under both the Chaldean and Medo-Persian empires and compiled this book in the mid-6th century BC. But after his
we'll pick
death,
this back up in the next podcast, talking about Cyrus the Great and the conquest of the Medo-Persian Empire on the Babylonian Empire.
the fulfillment of these prophecies continued. Now the third section of the statue was the belly and thighs of bronze, representing the next major empire. This was the Greco-Macedonian Empire from 333 BC to 31 BC. Of course, we know this from history, but the Bible also declared it by name in the vision of the ram and the goat, explaining the male goat is the kingdom of Greece. Verses 7 and 8 describe the transfer of power from the Medo-Persian Empire to the Greco-Macedonian Empire, saying, "There was no power in the ram to withstand him, but he cast him down to the ground and trampled him, and there was no one who could deliver the ram from his hand." In other words, the Greco-Macedonian Empire would defeat and overtake the Medo-Persian Empire. That is exactly what happened. The vision of the ram and goat, as well as what is revealed in Daniel chapter 7, give far more incredible details regarding what took place and what would happen to the Greco-Macedonian Empire, all of which were recorded hundreds of years before it ever happened. If you'd like us to make a video explaining these details, let us know in the comments. The fourth section of the statue in Daniel 2 was the legs of iron. Of course, this represented the kingdom that would rise up and put down the Greco-Macedonian Empire. This was the Roman Empire. The fourth beast of Daniel's vision, recorded in chapter 7, describes this empire as dreadful and terrible and exceedingly strong. It had huge iron teeth. There are a couple of additional points to understand about this kingdom that we'll highlight here, but additional videos are needed for a more in-depth explanation. In the meantime, you can order our short book on the Beast of Revelation, which contains a detailed chart explaining all of this information. Just click the link right here, and as always, it's completely free. Now, the first point is that the Roman Empire would rule from 31 BC until it fell in 476 AD. Its fall is described in Revelation 13 verse 3 as the deadly wound, but it goes on to say his deadly wound was healed, which brings us to the second point. After the initial empire weakened and came to its end, there would be 10 additional revivals or kings, represented by the 10 horns of Daniel 7. There will be 10 additional revivals.
What happens in that he's talking about here, that he's referring to the wound on the head in 476 AD. Well, 476 AD is when the Visigoths sacked the city of Rome for the first time. This is what inspired St. Augustine to write, what's the name of the work that he wrote in response to the sack of Rome? City of God is what is that work. So that happens in 476. So that's what he's making reference to here now. But like I was explaining to you in the beginning of this podcast, that Rome didn't fall just because the Visigoths sacked it. That eventually Rome makes an alliance with the Carolingians, and the Carolingians carry on Rome to what they believe is now even the new Rome, Goes
on to say his deadly wound was healed, which brings us to the second point. After the initial empire weakened and came to its end, there would be 10 additional revivals or kings, represented by the 10 horns of Daniel 7. And third, of these 10 revivals, 7 of them would come after the emergence of a religious blasphemous system that would rise out of the Roman Empire. You can read about that in Daniel chapter 7, verse 8 and 20, Revelation 13, 1 through 13, and Revelation 17, 9 through 11. Justinian's restoration in 554 AD was the first of the 7 horns, while the most recent proclaimed revival was under the Hitler-Mussolini regime. This made the 6th of the 7 final horns. The last one is still to come, which brings us back to the statue of Daniel 2. The 5th and final part of the statue in Nebuchadnezzar's prophetic dream was the feet and toes. These represent the yet future, final revival of the Roman Empire. Depicted in Daniel 2 as the 10 toes, and in Revelation 17 verse 12 as 10 horns, there will be 10 kings or rulers who will give their power over to this dominating final revival, also known as the beast. Revelation 17 verse 12.
All right, so that gives you a little bit more insight into the dream and the interpretation of Nebuchadnezzar's dream. It's very important, and I wanted to lay that out for you to understand that the legs, the 2 separate legs of the statue, they represent the western part of the Roman Empire and the eastern Roman Empire, and they never fail. And as the prophecy of the dream and the interpretation of the dream said, they never fail. At the end, they mix with clay. We're going to explain what that means in the next podcast. But this is very important in Christian eschatology and what Christians believe. But as you just saw, even Jews believe this. And this is a Jewish text. Daniel was a Jew. And they believe that America, Europe, is the new Rome. Adam. We'll explain more about what that means in the next podcast. I hope you guys have a great week, and I'll see you on Friday.